Hey, Kerry here. I am giving what I hope is a short video walkthrough of Plotly Studio. It could turn into a long video, don't know, we'll see. I haven't rehearsed this or recorded this. This is pretty much just supposed to be a reaction video of a new BI toolset that I've come across. So a few weeks ago, I was very kindly invited to try out Plotly Studio Early Access. A number of people in the data visualization and BI community have also been invited, and you can see lots of reviews on those on LinkedIn. I decided to give it a whirl. I've provided some feedback to the team, but I wanted to explore it a little bit further in this format with no rehearsal to potentially give others a preview without having to sign up and do the downloads and things like that. So give me a second. So Plotly Studio is advertised here as a new AI-powered desktop app for creating data apps and visualizing data. And the mission stated here on this page introducing Plotly Studio is that it's to make it a very flexible and sophisticated analytic tool for everybody, making it accessible for as many users as possible. So the claim here is that Plotly Studio automatically generates these wonderful dashboard apps quickly within minutes with nothing but a data set and optional context or goals. So that's what I'm going to be looking at today, seeing if that tool kind of lives up to that claim, or if it doesn't, it has the potential to. So in the data analytics space, to be able to create a dashboard in minutes is really quite exciting. These things can take days, weeks, months, although when it comes to months, there's a lot of requirements gathering and things that will drag that out, and the data and semantic modeling tends to drag those projects out quite a bit. But aside from that, that's getting off the track. Ultimately, it does take, a significant amount of time. So on this introductory page, there's the claim that the apps are beautiful, they're fast, they're backed by code, and that they are incorporating patterns and recommendations that the team have used over their 10 years of experience building dashboards and in the data analytics space. And so scrolling through, they've just got some examples of the outputs here. Using various different sort of data sets. So we've got financial data sets, solar panel data sets, a Medicare data set, and a flight delays app as well. So saying again, Plotly Studio generates domain-specific apps, computes domain-specific formulas, and often surfaces interesting visualizations outside your proclivities, which I don't know quite what that means. Outside your proclivities. Every Plotly chart generated is associated with auto-generated controls and callbacks to run additional analytics or modify the visuals. The generated apps are backed and editable in Python code, so that's very good and promising as a data analyst to be able to edit the resultant data visualizations in the underlying code. And it also opens up a whole new class of sophisticated data visualization capabilities that were previously relegated to power users working in code. So that's good as well. So a lot of people that want to tap into data visualization and data analytics seem to always get hit by a wall of having to learn a big variety of languages. And quite often they get stopped by having to learn Python code. It's just they don't have the time or the skill or the intent really to want to do that. And it's also, it takes a lot of time, right? So we don't want to have to be crossing all these different tools. We don't want to have to learn DAX. We don't want to have to learn, R. We don't want to have to learn Python. We don't have to want to learn Vega, D3 to be able to get the data visualizations we want. So being able to not be a power user and be able to have access to these tools is a really cool thing. So as a data analyst myself, as many low-code tools that I can use to create these data visualizations and analyses, the better. Like, I'm hungry for that. So in each component within the app, the charts, the data processing module, global filter panel, the layout, the theme are all accompanied by a code file, natural language specification file, and the initial prompt that generated the chart, which is great because we always want to go back to the prompt and to be able to edit prompts as well. Editing these components can be done by editing the specification file or the code. Awesome. The specification file resembles product requirements document. It's a declarative representation of the behavior. Specification resembles the product requirements document. Okay, I might have to look at that a bit more. Plotly Studio keeps the specification file and the code in sync, so editing one will patch the other and vice versa. So we've been using the product internally, falling in love with a new workflow, tried it out on some of our Figure Friday data viz challenges and found the results ranked among some of our favorites written by scratch. So I rebuilt some of our internal KPI dash apps in a fraction of the time, hours instead of weeks, and was able to add my colleagues' requests and suggestions simply by copying and pasting their requests into the specification file. Okay, so that's someone sort of maybe emailing, hey, I want this in the Dash app, and he's just copied their email and put it into a context. So this is a favorite chart generated by Plotly Studio, sophisticated timeline analysis for the chart, which actually looks pretty sophisticated, to be honest. So that's quite promising. And this looks pretty cool as well. So here the case is that it makes it easier and faster to build Dash apps. So the magic of Plotly Studio is that there is virtually zero learning curve to create something amazing. So I'm going to test that to see if that's what they're claiming. You don't need to prompt hack or fuss around in a terminal or even install Python to get started, which is wonderful because that's a complete blocker for me. I can't be bothered having to install all of these libraries, making sure that they're not deprecated, all of that kind of stuff. So I don't use Python as much as I do wish to use it because of these reasons. It's quite effortful. And when you're working on corporate laptops, having to do all that can be quite painful and also prohibitive. So all you need is 2 minutes and a data set. And then talking here about how do we trust the results. So a lot of the data issues will be ambiguous to the machine, multiple columns with similar names, and multiple different ways to compute a metric. So if your data is complex, you will need to manually verify the AI's work. Users have a tendency to take AI's output at face value, and many AI products on the market don't lend themselves to critical inquiry or verification, which is also true because you get given an output and you can't see how that output was created. You can't debug, you can't test, you can't see any of the reasoning underneath. And without links to sources, you can't verify the outputs either. So it makes it really quite a frustrating tool to be using. So in Plotly Studio, the AI isn't actually doing the data analysis itself. The underlying LLM doesn't crunch any numbers, which is good because they can't. LLMs cannot calculate, it can't do maths. It generates the code that will do so. The code is right there. It's not hidden behind a modal or a spreadsheet cell. We generate the code in an organized, modular way that is easy to scan, version control, and peer review. So it doesn't do the data analysis itself. It doesn't crunch numbers, but it generates the code that will do so. Okay. There's my skeptical brain coming in there. The specification file also describes the behavior of the code and the analytics automatically. It describes the formulas, the filters, and the transformations, and it is formatted clearly and concisely. Okay, well, that sounds quite useful. But I do have some questions about the model that is used underneath this, the LLM model. Because previous experience with LLMs is that descriptions aren't always correct. The specifications are editable and stay in sync with the code and the chart. Every component and module of the app has its own specification file. Okay. The apps themselves include helpful indicators here to show you exactly how many rows are filtered and other errors that can pop up. And that they're continuing to work on this to provide more experiences. The value of Plotly Studio is that the end results are more permanent than a chat transcript or prototype. You can create working data apps that you can publish, share, and iterate on as your data changes. These apps connect to live data sources, run analytics on the fly, and keep up with your operations. Plotly Studio lets me build data apps 10 times faster than doing it manually. So I have recently shared an article on 10 times engineers, so that just makes me smile a little bit. But for me and my team, the real value isn't that it makes us more productive. The value lies in possibility. Yes, but you can't sell possibility. It doesn't get the job done and it doesn't produce outcomes in your day-to-day. The biggest shift has been seeing apps come to life that would never have been built otherwise. Internally at Plotly, I've watched Studio unlock projects that sat on the back burner because they were unrealistic given the time or resourcing. We know Dash better than anyone, and still I've seen apps built with Studio that wouldn't have happened without it. And look, that's fair. So the person at the top here, Chris Palmer, says that he wrote Dash. So, that's probably quite a fair statement to say. So this is interesting. We started our design by mapping out the data analysis journey from start to finish, not just the last mile of data visualization, but the whole dang journey. So I did mention that I have used this before. I didn't read through all of this when I first picked it up, right? So one of the things I did is I just opened the desktop app and just plonked in data and used it. And it was very, very evident that they had actually thought a lot more about the process that a data analyst actually goes through, the actual data analyst workflow, because I've used AI-powered BI tools before, and I've used a lot of BI tools. I've dabbled with a lot of them, and it was very evident in the design of this app that they thought about data visualization analyst process and that they did have domain expertise in data analytics. So it's designed by data analysts for analysts, and it does show. But this still doesn't quite fit my workflow, and I might talk to that. So we talked to hundreds of our customers and beta users, thank you, and recorded hours upon hours of ourselves painstakingly dog-fooding analytics projects from start to finish. So that's pretty sweet. It's really nice to know. When we talk to our beta users, every one of them is stuck between working in a BI tool that's a bit too limited and doesn't lend itself well to automation, or working in code, which is limitless but also highly specialized. Yeah, that's certainly a pain for me. There's a lot of fussing around, correct? Installing Python, theming, annotation, placement, coordinates, sharing your work, debugging callbacks, parsing dates, caching data, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. Plotly Studio gets you from 0 to 1 immediately. it's a big claim, 0 to 1, maybe 0 to, 80% of the way, maybe. It will create an app that passes, loads, schedules, analyzes, and visualizes your data. It comes batteries included. I don't know what that means. And with beautiful generative themes and pre-installed Python. And I loved the pre-installed Python. I would find it easier to work backwards than forwards. That's interesting. I've made thousands of charts and data apps over the last 10 years at Plotly, and I know our libraries inside and out. I've read a significant part of them, and I still have a hard time imagining the right visualization in my mind's eye. Okay, this is where I might differ, because I start with the visualization first. And I have used Plotly.js and Plotly Chart Studio. So if I can show you here, for example, it's the UI where you can upload your data and then go through and, like Power BI and Tableau, start to draw your data. And then like Vagrelite, there's the underlying JSON, which you can tweak and things like that. But I'm not overly familiar with Plotly, and I've dabbled with Python, but I'm not overly familiar with Python. I just haven't had the time or inclination to really learn it at an expert level, but I can get by with it. So this will be interesting to see how that's potentially different. It's easier and faster to work from a first draft, and that's the magic that we've designed in Plotly Studio. We show you something immediately based on your data and let you iterate from there. Which I might potentially find irritating. Because for me, I'd want to follow my own thinking processes. And so if I'm analyzing something, I have a set way of doing that in my head, and I'd want to deeply understand the data or understand data, think about the questions that I'm asking, think about the story, the data and layout, and then the many variables, and then how I would represent that graphically. And see, I'm a visual thinker, not a verbal thinker, so that is already visually presented in my head. I'm already moving things around spatially in my head, and I need to have that logical flow to then get to the solution, the output that I want. If I've given something halfway through and I've skipped steps, that's going to cause me a lot of confusion. And it just, and you see that sometimes in my work, that I can get quickly frustrated if I haven't followed process from start to finish, and they're thinking from process start to finish. And therefore I can't trust that I've done things correctly and that I've thought about all these different angles, because things are in a system, right? They're not linear, especially in data analytics, right? Thinking processes are part of a system. And if you just pluck out the middle of that and you haven't considered all the inputs and the variables, it's easier to get lost. I don't know if that makes sense. Iteration, though, is good. So when I do go through my design process, I'll start with the data and ask questions, or I'll get questions and then collect the data based on the questions, or get data, have questions, collect more data, and then formulate more questions. Then I will sketch that out, but usually the sketch is done in my head, sometimes on a napkin, sometimes in PowerPoint or whatever, but it's usually in my head, or it's roughly done in, say, a Power BI tool where I just sort of loosely put things around. And then iteratively develop the analyses and the stories from there until I'm ready to then build and develop and do that optimally. So the iteration process is messy, it's not completely accurate, the calculations aren't all accurate until I've decided, yep, that's the way I want to go, that is where I want to spend my time, and then I'll go through the development process. And of course, it's even that's still iterative. So BI tools have long touted their UIs as enabling exploration. But whenever I use a chart editor, and I've built a fair number of them myself over the years, I often feel like I'm fumbling and not exploring. Hmm. I would don't think that is my experience. So with chart editors, I feel like I'm exploring unless the tool itself is quite limited and I can't do the visualizations that I want to do with that chart editor. Um, if I'm building, say, with Vega or Vega Lite and I'm using the JSON, I feel like I'm fumbling trying to get things to do things the right way, right? So I'm not as productive with my code as I am with a drag and drop interface. Data is never perfect, and data viz requires a tremendous amount of wrangling, shaping, joining, pivoting, and transforming data in advance of even visualizing it. I 100% agree. It's an advanced skill set, even if it's behind a GUI. Which is an interesting point because Plotly Studio, when I first used it, only used one CSV file. So with this tool, you still have to do that. Plotly Studio cuts to the chase and incorporates all of that data transformation logic in addition to encoding the visualization to show you something that's immediately that you can iterate on. Okay. And not just one thing, but half a dozen charts with controls and callbacks for your data set. It's a tremendous leap forward in how I explore data, and there's no going back. Sharon. The future of AI won't be a chatbot. Good. So the current LLM era can feel like it's for power users. Coveted prompts, plans, and pro tips can make you feel like you're either in on AI or you're out. Fair point. As I built apps with AI, I found the results to be both breathtaking and inconsistent. When I looked at the apps that the LLMs created, whether through ChatGPT, Claude, or is it Claude? Or Cursor, I found myself thinking that that's not how I would have done it. It can get pretty unwieldy pretty quickly, and it's not easy to get over your skis. Okay, I don't know if that's an Americanism. Chatbots are kind of chaotic, so we can put it on rails. Plotly Studio isn't as widely open-ended as a chatbot, but the results are consistent and high quality. It's a balancing act between finding the places that need to be flexible and open and the other places that can and need structure. So I wanted to offer a new type of experience, something structured and modular, which is great. I 100% agree with that approach. Plotly Studio produces apps that incorporate a ton of the best practices that we've learned and improved over the last 10 years, surfacing our customers, our house style, which is also extremely promising. Okay. And so that's basically a rather long run through of the page, but I think that's important to go through in terms of understanding how and why this was built. And then you can see whether, it says it's promising. Is it promising? So what then I'm going to be testing is some of these claims that, it's easy to use. You don't need to be an expert coder, right? We can skip that. You'll get an app in 2 minutes. It's easy to edit and iterate on top of it as well. And also, whether if it doesn't meet those claims, whether I'll actually find it useful, whether I want to work with it, whether I think it's worth investing in, and my general excitement about it. And so what I'm going to do now is I've run through 3 examples data sets before very, very quickly, just some data sets I had saved to my computer. These data sets were actually, I think, all of them publicly available data sets on things like Kaggle or some data visualization challenges. So that's an important thing to know and understand as well when we're dealing with LLMs, being that the results are very much around what they're trained on. Basically, if you start to deviate from that, you'll get really rather bizarre results. So the first data set I tried, I got an okay result, and I was actually quite surprised with some of the graphs. So it made me think differently about my data and produced a graph that I didn't even consider producing. So that was great. I found that quite inspirational and inspiring, which is very positive. The second one I tried, the second data set, wasn't really that great at all. And the third one was pretty decent. So what I've done now is for this walkthrough, I've created a data set from a Harry Potter data set. I had to drag a lot more data in. So the previous CSV files I used were quite small data sets. I've created a much larger, more interesting data set to work with to see what the result would be with that around a Harry Potter data set. I will look at that now and see what it generates and yeah, see how we go. So the data set that I'm using here is a Harry Potter data set, and it contains information about Harry Potter dialogue from the movies, information about the characters, character name, gender, house, species, Patronus, information about the wands, the chapter name, maybe title, place names, and place categories. I'm not sure what these place categories are. They seem to be the same data, which might be my fault when I created this and I've missed some information. That's okay. We'll continue to work with the data. So opening up Plotly Studio, and we've got this first window that doesn't scroll up and down. So I can see there's next steps, but I don't know what those necessarily are, and I can't click through them. So the first thing it's asking me to do is to upload data, suggested formats, CSV or Parquet. So that's what it's limited to at the moment, but that doesn't mean that's where it's always going to be limited to. Max size 200 megabyte. The first row must include column headers. So I'm just going to go and upload the file now. And then hit the next button and set context and goals. Plotly Studio will process your data and derive interesting charts no matter what. But if you have a specific aim or set of questions you'd like to answer, please include them. Okay, so I could just skip this part and see what it comes up with, but I do have some questions. So I'm going to look at the data again. And what have I got? So we've got the dialogue. I've got character, gender, house, species, Patronus, wandwood, and place. So I guess some of the questions would be who has the biggest speaking parts? So maybe I should think about rephrasing that in terms of making it easier to calculate. So I could describe instead what I want to see, such as count of dialogue lines, by character, name, just deciding whether I want to see what comes out when I say who has the biggest speaking parts, but I think I'll just not do that. Count of dialogue by character name. What else do I want to know? So I've got count of dialogue by character. I want to know character interactions. So who is seen with who more often? So how would I want to phrase that? Let me think about that for a minute. Frequency of character co-occurrences. Now, maybe I could put that a little bit in more simpler terms. Let's see what comes out with that one. And I would actually like to see a network diagram. So a network diagram of characters appearing together in chapters. I want the nodes to be sized by count of dialogue or count of appearances per chapter. So count of chapter appearances. And the weight of the edges. So I think there's other terminology. So some people call them other things. I call them edges. So let's see what happens here. So instead of doing a comma here, and the weights of the edges sized by, so it needs to be sized by the count of chapter appearances of each character. And the weights is by number of co-occurrences. Oh God, I can't spell. Now, this is kind of a black box. I don't know if this can do sentiment analysis. So maybe I'll give this a try. Sentiment analysis of the movie dialogue by chapter. Over time, I don't know, it's not really over time. By chapter and movie. If it can't do sentiment analysis, what I would like to see is that if you can have a look in this data set, and this is analysis I did years and years and years ago, was a count of the exclamation marks and the question marks, because at the time I wasn't going to run a sentiment analysis over it because it was a huge data set. So what I'm going to do is also ask that same question. So count of exclamation marks and question marks by chapter. So count of exclamation mark and question mark by chapter. Now, I know people are going to sort of comment about how to prompt correctly. The claim was you don't need to know how to do that. You don't need to prompt hack or anything like that. So I'm coming at this in this way and in this manner deliberately, because this is how I'm thinking, and this is, without having to do all this stuff. It's just what's coming out of my head. And what else would I like to know? And I think I'd give the rest of it up to the tool and see what comes out, right? So I think they're the kind of the main things I want to know. I also want to know, lines by gender. So count of dialogue lines by character name, full stop. Dialogue lines by house and gender, frequency, character co-occurrences, full stop. Delete network diagram of characters appearing together in chapters, the node size by the count of chapter appearances of each character, and the weights of the edges sized by number of co-occurrences, sentiment analysis of the movie dialogue per movie and chapter, don't know what it's going to produce, and then the count of exclamation marks and question marks by chapter. Done. Sorry that took so long. This is a unedited walkthrough. Outline. This will outline the data app that Plotly Studio will build using context goals and the data you provided. Generate outline. So we see how long this is doing. 10 seconds, 11 seconds, 12 seconds, 13 seconds. It says it will create this in 2 minutes. Let's see. Let's see, 20 seconds almost there. 30 seconds. I'm making it think hard. $50. It's approaching 2 minutes. Well, 1 minute. 60. There we go. Harry Potter dialogue analysis. Comprehensive analysis of character dialogue patterns, relationships, and sentiment across the Harry Potter movie series, exploring character interactions, house dynamics, and emotional themes throughout the storyline. Cool. Excellent. Charts. Chart number 1, count of dialogue lines by character name as a bar chart with drop down to filter by movie title and a slider to show top N characters, top 20. Now I can change that, I think, or remove it. I don't think I can. Yes, it's editable. I can change that to top 10 if I wanted. I'll keep it as top 20. Dialogue lines by house and gender as a grouped bar chart with checkboxes to toggle visibility. Okay, I was hoping for something a little bit more sophisticated, and I didn't necessarily want to see the house and gender together. Perhaps I do. Frequency of character co-occurrences as a heat map. Okay. Slider to filter minimum co-occurrence threshold, 5 occurrences. Cool. Exclamation marks and question marks by chapter as a line chart. How many chapters have we got? Chapter ID. Yeah, okay, fair enough. 234. But that's across all movies. And we've got movie chapter, so it'd be interesting to see here. I didn't update my data set. Okay. Yes, fair enough. That's a lot. Distribution of dialogue length by character as a box plot. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Dialogue length by character. Yeah. Yeah, it's better than. Yeah, no. Character dialogue frequency across movie progression as a stacked area. Ooh. I don't know what that's going to show me. Right here, wonderful thing is you can add charts, but I'm not going to. Global filters, themes, magical fantasy theme with deep purple and gold color scheme inspired by Hogwarts house colors. Elegant serif typography. Ew, I don't know if I like this serif. Gradients, starry accents, focus on character relationship analysis and sentiment patterns throughout the movie series progression. So generate application. Let's go. So this has so far taken more than 2 minutes because it includes my prompting. So we had 60 seconds to generate the spec, and I don't know how long this is taking, but it's probably going to take about 2 minutes or what. Let's have a look. So we've got setup, data, layout, theme, components, and charts that are generating. It's still going. I'm probably not going to edit this bit so people get an actual idea of how long it does take to generate. Don't have anything interesting to talk about or sing about. I can sit here and drink my tea. Oh, we got an error. This is the first time I've seen that. What's this? I probably should have waited. Now I've interrupted that. So it's only got 7,280 of 744 rows. Oh, okay. There's not really any. Empty row data will be filled by callback. Or is this just the code? It's not really going to tell me. It doesn't immediately tell me what's wrong. All right, so let's go back here and then here we go. What have we got? So Harry Potter dialogue analysis, purple and yellow, quite magical, which is pretty cool. Don't like the font at all. And this Plotly label is a bit gross. Movie title, all movies, all characters, all houses, female, human, male, species, chapter range. Okay. Dialogue length characters. Why would I want to filter by that? That's a bit bizarre. And locations. Okay. 7,280 dialogues, 125 unique characters. Average dialogue length is 56 characters. 82% Gryffindor. Now, is that dialogue or characters? 8 movies covered. Dialogue lines by character: Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, Albus Dumbledore. Well, that looks like it's a very simple chart. So if I went into the dialogue lines by character, I get the preview of the chart here, which I'll skip because it takes a while. And I can read the specification. Create a bar chart showing dialogue lines by character. Computations. Count dialogue lines per character using the group by aggregation. Sort characters by dialogue count in descending order. That's pretty cool. Limit results to the top n characters based on a slider value. Aggregations, group a character name and count dialogue lines. Apply movie filtering before aggregation if specific movie selected. So here we can't edit these. I can't see a space to edit these. So if I wanted to change the colors or use character ID and character name, I can't do it from this window, but I can do it from this window. How would I save it? So if I went 200, there's a save button there. So I'll test that out later, but I won't do that now. Let's wait for the preview again. Can I move these around? No. Can I move these around? No. So if I want to move some of these around in order, I can't just drag and drop. Or resize them. See how these aren't aligned? And I probably want that to be a bit smaller. It's huge. Dialogue lines by house and gender. Okay, that's very simple. So Gryffindor males speak the most. Okay. What's this? Character color currents heat map. Okay, there is something there right in the corner there. Zoom. Oops. Very. Let's try this. Oh, here we go. Nope. Nope. I used to be able to do this a bit better. How do I reset? Reset axes. Right. I'm going to zoom. There's definitely something. Oh, down here now. It's moved. That's weird. Harry Potter with Harry Potter. Hermione and Harry, Ron and Harry, Albus and Harry. Doesn't quite right. Because I did this a few years ago now, and it doesn't look quite right. But it could be the scale, the color scale. Or characters they chose, because there's a lot more characters. So we've got 125 unique characters. So I don't know how these are chosen along these axes. I don't know who Wahlberger Black is or Dillis Derwent, but they wouldn't be some of the most commonly seen characters. So that one looks a bit sus. Punctuation marks by chapter, exclamation marks by question marks. Can I change this to movie? I don't want it by chapter, I want it by movie. So that's something I might see if I can go and edit. Punctuation marks by chapter. This might be painful to watch. I doubt this is going to get much views. So if I go with code, graph ID, error, loading data, movie, label, movie, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered. And I don't think I want to waste people's time watching this. Trying to change the backend code. Potentially I could, but it's just, I just want to be able to do it quickly. Dialogue length by distribution by character. So this is something I didn't ask for, and it generated. So number of lines over time. Interesting. Chamber of Secrets as planned. So they're all in order, which is cool. That's actually pretty cool that they've ordered these movie names in sequential order. It's very clever. Doesn't tell me anything hugely interesting. What happens if I deselect that? That's pretty cool too. But I can't, I'd have to go all the way to the top here if I wanted to see by a specific character, which I can do, which is also pretty cool. Dialogue length distribution by character. Albus, Rubius, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. So these are just randomly selected. So if I wanted to add Snape, okay, now that's pretty cool. But those dots appear to be the outliers by the looks of it. So Albus Dumbledore talks a lot more than Harry, with significant outliers. Interesting. That is pretty interesting, actually. That would take me a lot of time to do that myself if I wanted to produce that insight. And that was, I don't think that was in my original prompts, because I wanted to know the number of lines and the dialogue length by characters. So that is pretty cool. And then the Harry Potter dialogue data at the bottom with no sentiment analysis and no network diagram. I got a heat map instead, which is actually really quite interesting because I ran a smaller version of this data set before and I got a network diagram, but it wasn't a very good one. Now, my questions for this one were a lot different. So I've got different types of theme here. You can see it's very different from the other one. I didn't specify the theme in this one. And I got a bar chart with the frequency of dialogue by character. I got dialogue length again. I got a character activity by location. And a network diagram that looked a bit sus, which didn't really tell me an awful lot of information, and it didn't weight the nodes the way I wanted to do, weighted. Most common dialogue phrases turned up trumps. And the punctuation frequency was a stacked bar chart instead of a line chart, and that looks an awful lot better than the previous result. So, thoughts? So the introduction to Plotly Chart Studio said, you don't need to prompt act, you don't need to spend a lot of time in it, you just need to put some goals in. Maybe the way that I phrase them produces different outcomes and outputs, but the point was that it's supposed to be easy to use and you get a good result immediately and quickly. It still has the same problems that a lot of these LLM type apps do produce, right? It's unpredictable what's going to come out. You don't know how it's going to analyze things. And it still requires tweaking and rework. What I do like about Plotly Studio is if you do have that Python skill and the Plotly skill, you've worked with it a lot. You've worked with Dash a lot, you're quite experienced in using that tool. This could potentially save you a lot of time, right? It could, if you were going to build an app from scratch, you can take components of this and copy and paste the codes, the bits that work well and the bits that you can kind of tweak. But if you're not very familiar with Dash or Plotly and you're not that expert level, it's not going to be good for you. Unlike the clean in the front part of this, it's just going to be too much effort. It's going to be overwhelming. What it does do, though, is that it can provide, because this is built by analysts that have years and years of experience, it can provide inspiration and different ways of thinking about the data that you might not necessarily have thought about, right? So looking at dialogue lengths by character might be something that you haven't thought of doing before, and then that just sparks a wave of creativity, which is really cool in that respect. But I would never really trust the output. I would always want to rebuild and make sure the calculations are correct and that I know how it's built going up, that it's documented well, because we all know what happens when we, receive for example, a Power BI report, because that's the one I work with the most, someone else has built, and you have to reverse engineer it, and it's a nightmare. So knowing how things are built and trusting how it's built and being able to verify and validate the calculations and the logic going into that is really quite important. And moving around things on a dashboard and rearranging things that someone else has created is kind of, a bit, not confronting. I don't know what the word is. It'd be quite difficult to wrap your head around what the story that person was initially trying to tell. And so this doesn't really tell a story. And from the Plotly Studio, it's not easy to just, click and drag and drop and resize and move things around on the canvas as easily as you would in, like, say, Tableau or Power BI. And the point of trying to ease data analysts' pain and time is to be able to be as low code as possible. So to be able to move things around on this dashboard, I couldn't tell you how to do it. I presume you come in here and then you look at the code and then you would reorder things. Okay. So it's cool that there is some potential there, but it still has the same downfalls as using other LLM tools at the moment. But I am really, really, really quite impressed by the thought that's gone into this. So the first part of a data analyst workflow is really quite well documented, but the tweaking and the iteration part, that process that we go through, we repeatedly, get data, ask questions of our data, ask more questions, collect more data, ask more questions, wireframe, move things around, tweak things, put the story together, then develop and build and code. And even that then we'll be testing, and then we'll probably go back to that cycle and go through several cycles before we then produce it. And so this last part here has this big publish button, which is great. Click upload, fabulous. I don't know if we can export some of these visuals to SVG. Perhaps we want to put some fancy gradients on them in Adobe Illustrator, or put them into a PowerPoint presentation and put some finishing touches and flourish on them. I don't know if that's possible. I know in Plotly you can kind of do that typically, and I will just test that. Give me one moment. So if I wanted to come here, zoom in, zoom out, auto scale, reset axis, zoom, that PNG but not SVG. I wonder if that can be changed. Mm. Yeah, SVG is probably more preferable in that point, but yeah, there we go. So I'm gonna try the add chart button because I wanted that network diagram. So it says it will generate the most appropriate, but what if I just want an actual network diagram? I'll give it another go. Create a network diagram. Yeah, so learn to spell, Gary. Create a network diagram of characters as nodes. The size of the nodes equals the count of character appearances per chapter. The edges link to the characters. This is going to be a problem. I need to be able to describe what I want. Let's try again. Create a network diagram of character co-occurrences per chapter. So character code per chapter. Okay. The nodes represent characters. The size of the nodes represent number of chapter appearances of each character. The size of, now instead of edges, I'm going to say connections. The links, right? The size of the links represent the number of times a character, number of times characters have appeared together in a chapter. Let's see how this goes. I do think that these dashboards are limited in length and size. We can't change the height and width. Let's give it a go. I'm just going to pause until this is actually created. So one of the things, I guess, with this prompting that I particularly have issue is when I want to describe something to somebody, I tend to draw as I'm talking. That's the way that I prefer to communicate because I'm a visual person. Like what goes on in my brain is pictures and patterns and networks and things like that. I'm not particularly a verbal person. I do have a monologue, going in my head, but that's not my main method of thinking. And my main way of communicating to somebody is through gestures, through drawing. Like when I'm thinking, I have to doodle because that helps me think. So this sort of method of trying to do data visualization, describe what I want with words rather than drawing and sketching, is actually quite tricky for me. So this is what's being produced, and it's very, very, very different from the previous one that I did, but it might be because there's an outlier and that's causing it to do this. So I've got this ability to be able to change the layout type, apparently force directed circular. See what happens when I hit circular. If I change the minimum, what I want to do is get rid of Harry Potter and Hermione out of that, and it might produce a better diagram. Network diagram showing character relationships based on chapter co-appearances. Node size represent individual character appearances. Edge thickness represents co-occurrence frequency. So the scale should be, if it was by character, 1 to 237. So that, yeah, okay. Because there's 237 chapters. But here, Albus Dumbledore has a 474 appearances. So this is potentially counting the rows of dialogue. Yeah, Hermione 800, Ron Weasley 865, Harry Potter 1922. So that would be dialogue. Sounds, or I could look in the code and actually find out what it is, but interesting. I'm gonna see if I can be bothered changing the code. So I tried to edit the code and found spots that I thought needed changing, throw it into ChatGPT 5, and it's stuck on a loop. No, I couldn't be bothered to do the code. I couldn't be bothered to Google and search and think. I suppose what I would really desire is the ability, once the chart is created, to be able to edit the chart like you would in Plotly Start Chart Studio and have that GUI. So yeah, it's still quite painful, the process of trying to develop data visualizations with unfamiliar charting libraries and languages and things like that. When I just wish I could just have drag and drop everything. Yeah, and so the process of iteration and things is still there. So walking through some other ones I've also done, so a stop and search analysis. This will take a while. I'm just going to pause the video. Oh, no, it's loading already. Yeah, here we go. It's interesting when I regenerate them that these texts are grey when they weren't before. And I don't know why it does that. I'm sure I can change the theme. So this is a data set showing the total stop and searches of police to residents. And the data shows search rate per 1,000 population, and then it also shows ethnicity by time period. And that's a very small data set, and that's the majority of the insights that you're really going to get out of that. And so this produced some line charts showing various stop and search rates by ethnicity over time. It's only done a selection here. There's actually quite a few there to pick from. And so far that looks pretty decent. Then we've got here, so this was a part of the prompting that I did, an overrepresentation ratio by ethnicity. And this was an interesting diagram that was produced that I was actually really quite surprised by. It's reasonably sophisticated. So you can filter through via the years, and you can see here that the horizontal bar chart showing the ratio of stop and search rates compared to population representation for different ethnic groups. Values above 1 indicate overrepresentation. So this is something that I'd have an interest of recreating, but I'd have to do it from scratch because I wanted to be certain that the calculations and the logic behind this was, quite sound. This one here is meant to be showing a tree map, but it doesn't seem to be doing anything here. And then we've got stop and search rates by ethnicity over time. So here we've got the years down the bottom. And this is a pretty decent visual because you get a heat map of the ethnicities, the rate per thousand over time. And this is actually a much better representation than the line chart here. And that heat map was generated automatically without any prompting. And I think I didn't ask it to create a bar chart, but I did put a question in on which ethnicities are overrepresented. And then it shows, some various other visuals that are just kind of overwhelming to look at. And this is the data set down the bottom here, so we can do some, filtering on that and see what's lying beneath that. So that was quite an interesting output that I was reasonably pleased with. And again, I'm not sure why this text is all grayed out. I don't believe it was before. Another data set that I tried, and I can't seem to scroll at the moment. It's not letting me do that. It's kind of run out of memory. I don't, it's just not working at the moment. So this was not a great output. Um, so it's got total vaccinations, average daily vaccinations being 845,000, peak daily vaccinations, and the overall vaccination rate of 65,000. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Um, and date range 205 days. Like, I don't know what that really is saying. So it's not going from December 2020 to December 2021. So it's, yeah, so it's less than a year basically. Um, and it's kind of cool that we've got things like linear scales and log scales. I think that's because that was part of the prompt. This was going back. I can't actually see my original prompts or the questions that I asked. So I can't actually go back and see those things. I don't think I asked it to do log. Maybe I did, because this is COVID vaccinations. And maybe it could have presumed log because it was COVID and that was part of training. Um, I don't know what I'm looking at. Here we go. Track COVID-19 vaccinations coverage across different ethnic groups over time, with multiple visualization options, including line charts, area charts, horizon charts, and maps. So I did ask for a horizon chart and didn't get one. I remember that now. So this was the ridgeline plot that I asked for and didn't get. I didn't ask to normalize by population. That was just generated from memory. And these are the age ranges, and this is the vaccination rate. So yellow means most vaccinated by age range. All right, this is hard to read. And I don't know what this 35, this scale is telling me. Coverage rate. So 2,500 as a coverage rate doesn't make sense. Number vaccinated. So if we have a look at the data, we've got age range, date, ethnicities, and how do I scroll across? It seem to scroll across. That's the data. Okay. This is the horizon chart that isn't doing anything. Okay. That's suddenly changed by ethnicities. I just don't trust anything this is telling me. And it's sometimes not producing anything. So this is an example of where it just causes confusion. Like, I've got no idea why there's ranges here. If it's ranges or very, very condensed lines, like, I don't know what that's telling me. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. I've got no idea what I'm looking at. Vaccine coverage, see how these data labels seem to be all bunched up as well. So if I were to go to the Yeah. Can't see prompt for overall data, layout, theme, filter component, data cards. This is the layout, filter data cards, data table. I can only see, I can't see the prompt for the entire, can I? Wait, data, specification, code. I can't see the prompt for the entire dashboard. Anyway, I feel like I'm wasting a bit of time here. Yeah. And so I guess that's probably one of the things that it may have struggled with that data set because of the way the data was modeled. And there's not really any instruction on how you're supposed to input this data. So again, if you use Dash, if you use Plotly really quite regularly, you might have that intuitive sense in terms of the best structure of your data to input into these things and you know what you'll end up getting. But the promise of this tool is to be able to make it easy and accessible for everybody. And without that sort of background knowledge, this being quite a big black box, again, you don't know what model it's using, you don't know how to set up your data, structure it, things like that. You don't, what the default we saw in the Harry Potter one was to count the rows of the data set, right, rather than group by the chapters and count the chapters. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. I think it's great, again, like I said before, for people that are experienced in Plot and Dashly, and they could probably take some great use out of this, just doing some initial exploration of data, getting some ideas to brainstorm, to copy and paste code because they are quite experienced, they know what they're doing, they know which code to take and add to and, manipulate. But it's rework and it can potentially add to a process rather than save time. And I think that building a dashboard with Dash and Plotly probably takes a fair bit more effort than building a dashboard with, say, Power BI. Again, it's just all rework. And I think building backwards, especially in an analysis piece, is a lot more work and a lot more friction than building forwards. So then the question is this the tool that I would want to use? And if I was looking for a BI tool, I might consider it as part of an enterprise solution. And if this was thrown in as a bonus thing, right? Because being able to just generate ideas, it's kind of could potentially be useful just to just hit a button, see what comes up, hit a button again, see what comes up, hit a button again, see what's come up, like refresh, get any ideas, right? But I wouldn't particularly go out and just purchase this idea generation thing. And there's a lot of commercial considerations as well, and there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. So I looked at the documentation and I've tried to find, it says LLMs, but what kind of LLM? Is this, one that's specific to Plotly, or is this based on GPT, Claude, Anthropic, like all these other ones? I can't see that anywhere in the documentation. But regardless of which LLM it's using or what LLM it's using, there's other considerations and risks in that around security and privacy and all that kind of stuff, which they've kind of addressed. But, how do I manage any kind of model regressions or updates or changes or, will I come across problems with model collapse, for example? So there's a lot of questions that I have in regard to that. So how do I, if I start using it and it produces wonderful outputs, and then after a while the outputs just get worse and worse and worse and disintegrate, like how can I be assured that that won't happen? So if it is sitting on OpenAI or Claude or Anthropic, which I don't know, and there's a charge or a cost to Plotly to be able to use this and integrate that. Is that going to change at some point in time? And is that, costs going to be then passed on? I don't know. A lot of questions. But if I just want to put those commercial questions and considerations aside and say, is it helpful in my workflow? Not at this point. Not for me, not for a new user. I just think it's far too much hassle. And I loved the speed at which I could analyze the data, but it's still not quite as fast as using Power BI, or even though Power BI is limited, right? I can't produce those heat maps and, things which I'd love to do.